the year of 1957, two English sisters, Joanna Pollock and Jacqueline Pollock, died in a tragic car accident. 1 year later, their mother gave birth to twins, Jillian and Jennifer, and when the twins were old enough to talk, they began identifying and requesting toys that had belonged to their dead sisters, pointing out landmarks that only the sisters would have known, such as a school they'd attended, and sometimes panicking upon seeing cars idling. And one time they shrieked that car is coming to get us. As the twins got older, these incidents became less frequent. The girls went on to lead normal lives. But still, the story of the Pollock sisters made its way to a Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychologist who studied reincarnation. And after studying thousands and thousands of supposed cases, Dr. Stevenson wrote a book telling of 14 he believed to have been real, including that of the Pollock sisters. In 47 BC, Cleopatra VII gave birth to a son named Caesarion, who she claimed was the son of Julius Caesar. So she's named him as co-ruler of Egypt in 44 BC, and surviving art depicts mother and son as co-rulers. Now, however, whether or not the offspring was truly Caesar's son is actually uncertain. Caesar never formally acknowledged the offspring as his own, and one of his friends, Gaius Oppius, even wrote a pamphlet denying that he was Caesar's offspring. Cleopatra died by taking her own life after she and Mark Antony were defeated by Octavian in 30 BC, and Caesarion passed away not long after that. With no remains of Julius Caesar or Caesarion surviving, it is unlikely that scholars will ever be able to determine with certainty whether or not Caesar was the daddy. Ancient writers describe a fantastic series of gardens constructed at the ancient city of Babylon. And the gardens impressed some ancient writers so much that they called the gardens a wonder of the world. Around 250 BC, Philo of Byzantium wrote that the gardens had plants cultivated at a height above ground level, and the roots of the trees are embedded in an upper terrace rather than in the earth. Well, so far, archaeologists who have excavated Babylon have been unable to find the remains of a garden that meets the description. This has left archaeologists with a question. Did these gardens really exist? The 600-year-old Voynich Manuscript is a mysterious codex that contains a series of illustrations and writings, and these writings, penned by an unknown author, have not been deciphered, and it's not clear. Is this an unknown language? Is this gibberish? Is this a code? We don't know. Sadly, it looks unlikely that it will ever be deciphered. It actually might be undecipherable. On the first night of February of 1959, 9 ski hikers passed away mysteriously in the mountains of what is now Russia. On the night of the incident, the group had set up camp on a slope, enjoyed dinner, and prepared for sleep. But something went catastrophically wrong because, well, they never came back. The scene bore marks of death by hypothermia, but as medical examiners inventoried the bodies, as well as the other 7 that were discovered over the months that followed, hypothermia no longer made sense. In fact, the evidence made no sense at all. One body had evidence of a blunt force trauma consistent with a brutal harming, another had third-degree burns, one had been upchucking red fluids, one was missing a tongue, some of their clothing was radioactive. There was a lot of theories. It was maybe maybe the big bad Russian guys were interfering, maybe it was, too many substances, maybe it was UFOs, maybe it was gravity anomalies. More recently, a documentary filmmaker presented a theory involving a terrifying but real phenomenon called infrasound, in which the wind interacts with the topography to create a barely audible hum that can nevertheless induce powerful feelings of nausea, panic, dread, chills, nervousness, raised heartbeat rate, breathing difficulties. Look, the only consensus remains that whatever happened involved an overwhelming and possibly inhuman force, because all of these things are not like the other. In the year 1900, 3 keepers of the Flannan Isles Lighthouse off the west coast of Scotland disappeared under the strangest of circumstances. So this lighthouse was manned by a 3-person team: Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur, with a 4th man rotating in from shore. So on Boxing Day, December 26th of the year 1900, the relief keeper arrived to find that none of the lighthouse keepers were present, and the only sign that anything was out of the ordinary was an overturned chair found near the kitchen table. No bodies were ever found, and there's been endless speculation since. Theories range from, passing away in the sea, abduction by foreign spies, ghost ship, giant sea monster, you name it, they said it. Whatever happened back in December of 1900 at the lighthouse, we may never know. From the year 1917 to 1928, 500,000 people were afflicted with a ghastly condition that could very much be part of the plotline of any horror film. The victims, very much alive and conscious, found themselves in inexplicably frozen states, their static bodies providing prisons for their minds. encephalitis lethargica, otherwise known as EL or the sleeping sickness, first appeared in Europe and quickly spread around the world, reaching really crazy levels in North America, Europe, and India by 1919. About a third of those stricken with the illness died, and of the survivors, nearly half eventually found themselves unable to physically interact with the world around them, all the while fully aware of their surroundings. It's the worst way to go. Although occasionally capable of limited speech, eye motion, and even laughter, they generally appeared as living statues, totally motionless for hours, days, weeks, or years. The cause is unknown. That's our mystery today, folks. One theory is brain inflammation triggered by a rare strain of Streptococcus, the bacteria responsible for many sore throats. Work with me here, folks. You know, strep throat. Science's best guess is that the bacteria mutated, provoking the immune system to attack the brain, leaving the victim helpless, but none of this explains why the illness disappeared only to resurface sporadically, be it in the Europe in the 1950s or China 10 years ago. We don't have answers. The story of King Arthur has been told and retold numerous times over more than 1,000 years. Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table, the Wizard Merlin, the sword Excalibur, they're all famous parts of the Arthurian tales. However, if King Arthur really did exist, the reality was likely less magical. I know, I'm heartbroken too. The earliest surviving accounts date to the 9th century and tell of a leader, perhaps not even a king, who fought several battles against the Saxons. And even the accuracy of these accounts is debatable. There are a number of sites in Britain that legends link to King Arthur, such as Tintagel, a coastal site that was supposedly his home. But excavations have not confirmed whether Arthur ever lived there or even existed. Ultimately, it seems unlikely that scholars will ever know for sure whether there was a real King Arthur or whether the man was purely fictional. Until then, I got a decom I'm gonna be watching. On the morning of June 30th of 1908, 770 square miles of forest in Siberia were flattened by what would have appeared to have been an explosion, except that there were no witnesses and no other evidence. This phenomenon became known as the Tunguska event, and has been classified by scientists as the largest impact event, which means a recordable impact between two astronomical objects, such as an asteroid and the Earth, in recorded history. But here's the mystery, folks. No impact crater has ever been found, which would kind of be an important earmark of an impact event. So, ergo, scientists can only really guess as to what might have happened. Maybe an asteroid exploded over Earth, and that destruction ensued beneath it in Siberia, and this was the after effect, but they still don't have a concrete answer. In December of 2016, a CIA officer checked into the American Embassy's health office in Havana, suffering from nausea, headache, and dizziness. A couple of days later, 2 more CIA officers reported similar ailments. By late 2018, the number grew to 26 Americans and 13 Canadians experiencing nausea, hearing loss, vertigo, losing fluid from the nose, focusing issues. In all the cases, victims claimed the symptoms were triggered by a strange noise that they'd heard at their hotel rooms or their homes. One person said the noise was high-pitched, another described a beam of sound that was pointed into their rooms. Some folks insisted that the noise was kind of similar to marbles rolling along the floor. But the illness was confounding medical experts everywhere. Doctors at the University of Pennsylvania, who examined some of the victims, diagnosed concussion-like symptoms, but there was no signs they'd suffered concussions. So look, some folks were like, okay, well, the Cuban government's up to something, right? Well, they said no. And a lot of the American investigators were like, nope, we believe you. And that's because they still don't know who or what made the victim sick. Was it a new type of weapon? The CIA was like, nope, we're not messing with that right now. In this case, what about ultrasound? Some folks are like, hey, maybe it's covert eavesdropping devices placed too close to each other by secret agents that might have produced a reaction, kind of like feedback at a concert. And recordings of the sounds from some of the victims only added to the confusion. 2 scientists who studied the recordings believed they captured the sound of male crickets having fun, and one of the scientists said that the insects are incredibly loud, like you can hear them from inside a diesel truck going 40 miles an hour on the highway. But still, the scientists have no idea why the sounds might have led to illness in humans. Look, maybe it was just nerves, because according to embassy officials, being in Cuba is a high-stress post. Diplomats are warned that there will be surveillance, there will be listening devices, and for some folks that puts them in a high-stress mentality, in threat anticipation mode. Yep, and that's all for today, folks. I've been Alexa. See ya!